Hey everybody, Aaron McMahon here from live.com. It is happy hour, I guess you can call it. It's Friday, September 9th, 2022, shortly after 4 p.m. here on Friday. A little over 24 hours away from Michigan's week 2 matchup against Hawaii. Kickoff is set for shortly after 8 p.m., about 8:05 Saturday night. The game is going to be televised on the Big Ten Network, so make sure you check your local listings and whatever else to try and get that. This is your weekly kind of chat. We started this last week. It's kind of a test to see if there was interest, and there was. We got going. We kind of discussed the week that was, the game ahead, and I plan on doing that again today. We're going to spend probably 15, 20 minutes kind of going over things. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll do my best to get to them and answer them. Thanks for joining us. We already have a huge crowd. But let's get going here. Michigan obviously kicks off against Hawaii tomorrow night. As things stand currently, Michigan is a 51.5, 52-point favorite, which is a astronomical number. My colleague Andrew Kahn actually went back and verified it. In fact, Michigan, the largest point spread in a Michigan football game history. This is the largest game they've been favored by. The line actually opened up at 46. 46 points on Sunday afternoon in Las Vegas, and it has since grown since then. So if you can imagine, Michigan is favored to win this game by 51, 52 points, depending on who you pay attention to, which is just monstrous. Given the opponent, it kind of makes sense. Hawaii is struggling right now, coming in 0-2. They've got a lot of problems of their own. We'll get to those in a minute. But let's kind of discuss the week that was right now. A lot going on in the Michigan football program. You know, they're coming off the rout of Colorado State last Saturday, 51-7. Not so much the victory and the way it happened, but there was just so much circulating around that game. Obviously, the quarterback situation. Cade McNamara got the first start. McCarthy is obviously set to get the start tomorrow. But between the quarterback situation and the defense and everything else, there's just a lot to come out of that game. First off, I want to kind of hit on Cade McNamara's comments afterwards. If you missed them or didn't hear them, he was very vocal. You know, he wasn't critical, I guess, but you could tell he was frustrated. His body language said quite a bit to me and my colleagues. He just looked like a guy who maybe he was frustrated. Obviously, in his play, he didn't play particularly well, as we all know. He missed some throws. Some throws were dropped. He really couldn't get into a rhythm, and I think he really suffered because of it. You know, he's not going to get the start this Saturday. That's obviously going to go to J.J. McCarthy and kind of Jim Harbaugh's plan. Quarterback plan here. We knew kind of coming into the year what this was going to look like. Cade was going to get the start week 1. JJ was going to get the start week 2. But going back to Cade's comments, you know, he clearly was bothered. He was clearly frustrated and I think upset, partially again at his game and the way he played. But I think he felt like he in a way was given a raw deal, and you can make the case he was. You know, he was the team starter last year, got them to the Big Ten title game, and did a lot for them. So it's a dicey situation, as we all know. It's been a fascinating one to follow. But he clearly started the week a little upset. Jim Harbaugh was asked about that kind of on Monday during his weekly press conference with the media. Didn't want to get too much. He didn't want to discuss the quarterback situation as detailed as he did the week before. He joked that you know, the ground had been plowed already, and he wasn't really going to dive into it. Partially because we're midway through the battle and it hasn't completed yet. But I think he didn't want to dive too much into what Cade was saying either. So JJ is going to get the start. You know, we'll see how long it goes. I suspect it's going to be at least the first half, probably well into the third quarter before there's any changes, kind of like what we saw Saturday with Cade and JJ. I do expect that Cade that will get some more time. He's going to get an opportunity probably to redeem himself in the second half. But nonetheless, it's going to be JJ's show on Saturday, and I think a lot of us are ready to see what he has to offer. I think we know to some degree. I mean, we've seen the arm at times, we've seen the legs. You know, we saw his touchdown run last week against Colorado State, and I think there's this assumption that he can kind of open things up, open this offense up, and make it a little bit more explosive than it has been for the last, 12 to 18 months. So we'll see. You know, JJ is a fascinating figure. We spoke to him Tuesday evening. First time he's really spoken to the media in almost a year. We talked to him briefly last year during the bye week. And at that point, as we all know, he wasn't really in the starting mix. He was playing a bit. He was a true freshman, still kind of getting the grasp of the college game and everything else. And now he's a little bit more mature. He handled himself, I thought, pretty well. You know, he said all the right things. He said all the right notes. He said he was waiting for his opportunity and he's eager for it. He said he paid a lot of attention to Cade McNamara and you know, some of the things he does well. And I think you can surmise out of that, some of the strengths of Cade. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes. He holds on to the football, and you can make the case maybe those are some of JJ's weaknesses. So he said all the right things. He's eager for he's eager for the start. As you can imagine, he hasn't started a football game now in over a year. He's the man all throughout high school, transferred down to IMG Academy, and was the guy down there too. So he's going to get this start. It's going to be a fascinating, I think, storyline to follow. Jim Harbaugh hasn't declared that he's going to name a starter permanently next week, although that is the assumption. That was the working plan. At least he wanted to kind of gauge what these two guys have and then kind of go from there. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We're calling this Friday afternoon kind of happy hour. This is Michigan football. They're about 24 hours out for their game against Hawaii. For those of you joining us, jump in the chat. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd love to answer them. We're kind of talking about the week that was with Michigan football and the week ahead. It's not a game where Michigan's expected to lose. I mean, this isn't expected to be a competitive game, so you're not expecting much, but there's just a lot to pay attention to, and the quarterback situation being number one. I'm really curious, too, to see how the defense responds after last week. I thought they played exceptional. In fact, they were the strength of the team last week. Of all the question marks coming in, it was how the defense was kind of going to bounce back from losing Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo and the like. And I thought they did a good job. It's a little bit different looking defense. I think schematically, they're getting more guys involved. You saw the pressure come from all three levels of the defense, and that wasn't the case every week last year. Mike McDonald wasn't afraid to pull the trigger at times, but it wasn't an every week situation and every position standpoint. I mean, we saw pressure coming every which way last Saturday. Mike Sanders sold the team's first sack. Yadi Anoma, the transfer from UT Martin, the former Alabama recruit, got involved. I think it was 7 sacks. 9 different guys were involved in those. So a lot of guys were flying the ball, and that was a storyline Jim Harbaugh talked about this week. In watching film last week, he couldn't help but notice every single player flying the ball. Winged helmets were showing up everywhere, and they really liked what they had. And this was kind of predicted. We'd heard bits and pieces about the Michigan defense this offseason, about how they were flying the ball, how maybe this was a better team unit than the one we saw last year. Fewer superstars. I think Jim Harbaugh in the summer called it the no-name, no-star defense. And I think that's kind of how they view it. They've got a lot of guys kind of buying in the same direction, going in the same direction. And you saw it, I think, on Saturday against Colorado State. They looked fantastic. I think it was for week one with a new coordinator. I think it went about as well as you would have expected. So we'll see how they do in week 2. They're going up against a very similar offense. Hawaii isn't the air raid, but they like to throw the ball. They like to get up and down the field. So I think you're going to see a very similar situation from Michigan's defense. I expect them to rotate a lot of guys in. They did that in the back end last week. They did that up front with the defensive ends and the outside linebackers. There's going to be a lot going on. I expect them to I think they touted they played 84 guys last week. I expect it to be probably a similar number on Saturday as well. For those of you just joining us, welcome. We're talking Michigan football. If you have any questions, drop in the chat. Love to answer. MLive.com right now, I threw up an updated depth chart just about an hour and a half ago. Injury report. For those of you unaware, it sounds like Carson Barnhart will not be available on Saturday. At least that's the assumption. Didn't sound like he was able to go early in the week. I saw him actually in a walking boot. He's got a sprained ankle, Jim Harbaugh said, so I would expect him not to play Saturday. But Ryan Hayes, I do. Ryan Hayes did not start last week against Colorado State. Ryan Hayes, big Michigan starting left tackle. They do expect to get him back this weekend, so I think Michigan's front 5 should be healthy and ready to go. They had to do some shuffling last week with Hayes out. They had to kick starting left guard Trevor Keegan out to tackle, and then they ended up starting Carson Barnhart, who ended up going down the first quarter due to injury. So they played some younger guys. They had to do some shuffling, and I thought given everything going on, they handled themselves pretty well. So they should be pretty healthy. No word yet on linebacker Nakai Hill-Green. He did not play last week with a soft tissue injury. No update yet on him. I suspect if it's close, they'll probably hold him on again. But if he's available, he may go too. So those two are kind of the question marks. And then Hayes, it sounds like we're coming back. Other than that, no long-term injuries. Michigan's been relatively healthy, guys, for the better part of the last year and a half. Aside from the season-ending injury to Ronnie Bell last year, Michigan's done a good job of holding up. So they should be healthy and pretty much ready to go. Quarterback situation will be fun to watch. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat, whether it's team related, personnel related, player related, throw it out there. Hawaii, as I mentioned, coming 0-2. They're under their first year head coach, Timmy Chang, former Hawaii quarterback, star quarterback there. Hawaii, frankly, is not very good. I mean, they've gotten outscored 112-27 by their first two opponents, Vanderbilt, Western Kentucky. They've got quarterback issues as well. They got their own kind of battle, but as my colleague Andrew Kahn wrote, for the wrong reasons. Braden Schrager, the starter week 1, really struggled. Threw 4 interceptions. They couldn't. They had trouble moving the football. He just didn't look like a legit starter. They ended up going with Joey Yellen last week against Western Kentucky. Yellen is a transfer from Pitt. He struggled as well. So it sounds like in hearing Chang talk this week, Hawaii's coach, they're both banged up. He wouldn't name a starter. No one really knows who they're going to start at this point. So your guess is as good as mine. I suspect Michigan's been preparing for those two all week. They've also got a third quarterback, Cameron Cooper, transfer from Washington State. He's a little bit more mobility. They may use him as well. So Hawaii they got a lot of issues, a lot of turnovers, a lot of penalties. I believe they lead the nation right now through 2 games with penalties and turnovers. So they're really struggling. And then they got to make the 4,000-mile trip over here to Ann Arbor, which doesn't get any easier. So a lot going on there. Michigan should roll to victory on Saturday. It just matters of in what way. Are we going to see another blowout like we did Saturday early against Colorado State, where Michigan jumps out to a big lead and coasts? Will it take them some time? I guess we'll see. Either way, J.J. McCarthy will be the guy under center. He's going to get the opportunity, certainly for the first half, probably longer. In reality, it's his job, I think, to be taken here. Jim Harbaugh had said that he was setting this up for the two starters. One was going to get the start last week. JJ is going to start this week. And given Cade's unimpressive performance last week against Colorado State, I think JJ has the opportunity here to win the job. He comes out there and doesn't screw up, doesn't have a ton of turnovers. I think he will be the week 3 starter against UConn. Good question in the chat, and if you have one, throw it in there, drop it in. I'll do my best to answer. Question from Kevin: how long will they go on with the 2 quarterbacks? And is this some type of game planning for Iowa? It's a good question, and it's something I don't think anyone really knows the answer to, and including Jim Harbaugh on the staff. Jim, I think ideally wants a starter named, a permanent. And when I say a starter, I mean a permanent starter, someone they can kind of go to every week for week 3 against UConn. But he hasn't ruled out the rotating thing either. So, I think if JJ comes out Saturday and plays well and they move the ball and they score points and he's looking great, he's going to get the start next week. And I think he would be your starter going forward. If he struggles or the offense isn't moving or for whatever the case may be, I can totally see Jim rolling with alternating quarterbacks, for the time being. He really likes both. He genuinely does. I know in most quarterback battles or situations, the old adage is if you have 2 quarterbacks, well, you have none. And I just don't think that is the case here at Michigan. We know what Cade McNamara can do from the leadership perspective and him managing the offense and being a leader on the team. He did that last year. He was fantastic. You couldn't have asked for much more from him. They got the Big Ten title and everything else. But I think Michigan obviously wants to take that next step and not only get in the playoff, but win the national championship. And I think there's this assumption that J.D. McCarthy is the guy in that regard. He's got the legs, he's got the stronger arm, he can complete the deep ball. And now it's about J.J. kind of proving that, showing that in a game. Jim Harbaugh had said they were both pretty neck and neck in practice, and that was one of the reasons why he rolled this out. So that's kind of where things stand at this point. It would not surprise me if this continues, folks. I know Jim wants it to end, but if I think you risk alienating or losing Cade if you do give JJ the permanent job. And going off of what we heard from practice during camp and everything else, they were really close. So I think to make a snap judgment or an assumption based off of one game a piece, I don't know if that's fair to Cade. So that's kind of where things stand right now. If you have a question in the chat, let me know. Yeah, comment from Right Tim. Cade brought about the O-line golf clubs he did. One was NIL deals this week. He's getting them fitted for golf clubs. He's done that before. He took the offensive line out for dinner last year. I think he got a deal with one of the steakhouses in Ann Arbor, and he did that as well. So he's certainly Helped out his O-line as he should. I mean, they're often overlooked or misjudged or forgotten about sometimes when it comes to protections and the like. So thank you all for joining us. It's been a blast. I'm trying to do this every Friday ahead of a football game, kind of calling it happy hour for Michigan football, talking about the week that was and the game ahead, kind of updating you guys on where things stand from a personnel standpoint, the team standpoint, kind of giving you a preview of the game on Saturday. As I mentioned earlier, it should be a blowout. This game should not be close. It's just a matter of how Michigan gets there. As I mentioned, Michigan's favored by 51, 52 points. It would not surprise me if they score 60 points on Saturday. I have a hard time, envisioning a scenario where Hawaii slows this team down. Predictions are up at mlive.com/Wolverines from all of us and the staff. This is where we're going. I think we're all picking a blowout as expected. As I mentioned, my updated projected depth chart is up at mlive.com/Wolverines. As is the injury report, as I mentioned earlier, just kind of updating you guys where things stand. Up there, we've got stories on Hawaii. We've got stories on Michigan football. Interesting tidbit, I guess, for the Hawaii connection. Roman Wilson, Michigan's receiver, is a Hawaii native. He came to Michigan from Honolulu a couple of years back. We spoke to him early in the week, and he said he grew up watching Hawaii, as you would expect. He watched the Colt Brennan days, and he saw Timmy Chang play, and if you're born on the island or you live on the island, you like football. I mean, Hawaii is your only option essentially. And there were years where they were very good, and there's been the case the last decade or so where they've really struggled. But there's a story up at mlive.com/Wolverines as well, kind of talking about Romans, growing up in Hawaii and rooting for Hawaii, and how they kind of come to Michigan. Interesting note too on Hawaii. Gosh, I wrote about this a couple of years ago when the deal was done. Hawaii is actually set to make $1.9 million from this deal. Now, typically, non-conference games, you play a lesser opponent in a smaller conference. They're paid pretty heavily. The standard going rate is a little over $1 million now. But Michigan agreed to fork out at least $1.9 million, which I believe to this day is going to be the biggest payout for a non-conference opponent coming to the Big House. As you expect, I mean, it's a long road for Hawaii, a long trip. They're spending a lot of money on travel, so I think you could justify that. Question: are they still called the Rainbow Warriors? Yes, Hawaii is still Rainbow Warriors. So if there's any other questions, throw them in the chat real quick. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, check out our coverage at mlive.com/Wolverines. We've got stories up there, a lot of them from the week that was. We spoke to JJ McCarthy. We spoke to Jim Harbaugh. As I mentioned, Roman Wilson. We got some player interviews up there. Got some stories in Hawaii too to give you kind of update on where things stand there and how they're looking. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Hope you guys check us out next week. I'm aiming to have this up, every Friday around 4:00. So just check the mlive.com Facebook page, our Facebook page, the mlive.com Wolverines Facebook page, wherever you're following. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and I will talk to you guys next week.